Hey, good morning, everybody. Dennis Mattern here with CreativeOne. I am so happy that you are able to join us. We've got a great crowd. Wow, I'm looking at the folks that are popping into the meeting here, and man, the best of the best of the best. So we're here today. We are here today to talk about RISA. In fact, I'm going to go ahead. I'll introduce that in just one second. But I do want to say we are recording today's presentation, so you can fact check. You can go back to it. For reference, so I'll get a copy of that out. And then today is meant to be interactive as well. So if you look over to the right side of your screen, now actually, if you look to the bottom right corner of your screen, you should see it's a robin egg blue color, or if you're colorblind, it's a light gray. It's a chat box. If you click on that, it'll pop open. Now, here's two things about that. So the chat, if you type in the chat, everybody's going to see it. So just be mindful of that. But there's also a Q&A button. And if you hit the Q&A button, I see that. And I will be your proxy. I will ask that question. So that'll be your voice. That'll be your participation, your opportunity to ask questions. We'll do a Q&A at the end. But if your question is germane to the moment, if it fits in, we'll just answer it right then. Now, as we go into RISA, we're going to talk with Wade and Alex, Wade Pfau, Alex McGeary. Your diagonal corners in this Brady Bunch screen that I've got going on. And I will be your host. We should all point like the Brady Bunch kids. But I will be your host. I will be your voice during this presentation. But then, Wade and Alex have built and designed RISA. We'll talk more about what that means and why it's important, why you're here. But two fantastic fellows. And when it comes to it, you've got Wade, the academic, the one-man think tank, perhaps one of the best phrases that I've ever heard. And then you've got the mathematical, the raw data side. But then you go up to Alex and you've got the behavioral finance side. Wade can tell you why that happened. Wade can give you the numbers on it. Alex can tell you what they were thinking when they did that. So this is fantastic. Now, so we've got the pretty face, we've got the academics, but we also have where the rubber meets the road. There we go. Is that phrenology when we look at it?
Yeah, there we go.
But at the same time, we also have Erik Bowman. And Erik, if you have not had a chance to meet Erik, he's up in the top quadrant up there. But Erik has a fantastic practice. He's out in Colorado. Fantastic practice. A couple things about Erik. This is actually really cool because I get to brag about you guys because you're just all so magnificent. Erik is a very structured advisor. He's meticulous in his approach when he adds new things into his practice. He also coaches other advisors at Creative in a program called the Rainmaker Program that is just so intentional. Maybe that's one of the best words when it comes to it. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. The other thing I want to mention about Erik is the reason Erik is also on here, besides being the where the rubber meets the road, Erik has incorporated RISA into his practice. And that's super, super important. So here's what we're going to do at this point. Remember, chat, bottom right corner, everyone sees it, Q&A. Only I see that. I'll be your proxy. Now we're going to go ahead. You don't have to look at us the whole time. So what we're going to do is this. We've got slides. I'm going to ask the gentleman, go ahead, and if you would click your cameras, we'll make the view better so we can make the slide as big as possible for everybody. So Alex and Wade, or Alex and there we go. Okay, so RISA, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the gentleman in here at different points to give the analogies, to talk to us about what's going on. So again, so happy you're here. So RISA, Retirement Income Style Awareness, and developed by Wade and Alex. And Wade, could you give a little bit of color as to, who's messing? Well, Alex, you've got to be messing around with my slides. All right, I'm going back. We're going back to the slides. And I'm just going to take control here, and I am going to boop and boop. There we go. Okay, so Wade, can you give a little color as to how you developed, where RISA comes from?
Yeah, absolutely. And so really it goes back to my background with the American College of Financial Services and with the RICP designation, really seeing how when you talk about retirement income, there's so many different approaches out there, so much disagreement. Should I use investments only? Should I incorporate annuities and risk pooling? Is there a role for bucketing? And at the end of the day, really needing to approach that in a more agnostic manner. There are different viable ways for people to build retirement strategies. And so what we really wanted to know was, at the end of the day, could we figure out what sort of characteristics might people have that would help identify a starting point for them, how they want to approach building their retirement strategy, how they can choose from amongst the investments-based approaches, the annuity-based approaches, the bucketing-based approaches. And that was really the genesis. We get so many questions coming in with what we were doing with our retirement researcher and so forth from consumers asking, should I do this or that in retirement? And the answer is always, it depends. But we were trying to figure out, well, can we get a little bit deeper into answering that beyond it depends? Do your preferences align with whatever you're talking about? So if person A writes in and says, I've heard I should be 100% stocks in retirement. Is that right for me? Well, with the retirement income style awareness, we can start to assess if that's something that might resonate with you, or if really in the other direction, I've heard that it's important to have annuities as part of my retirement strategy. Should I consider an annuity? Well, if your characteristics align with that, that's the whole genesis, was figuring out what sort of characteristics do people have that helps set a starting point for how they want to think about building their retirement strategy. And that's what the RISA became.
So with that, with the mathematics behind it, you bring in Alex. Alex, give your take on this.
Sure. No, I think Wade hit the nail on the head in terms of how do we blend the best of both worlds from psychology and from retirement income planning. For me, psychology it comes into this because we wanted to see if these were more generalizable traits that you can point to and identify retirement income styles. And so in an interesting manner, we effectively created a personality assessment tool to assess preferences with regards to retirement income. And in economics, it's all about what trade-offs you're making. Are do you prefer this or do you prefer that? And it comes in, everything comes at some sort of compromise. And interestingly enough, a lot of the top level personality assessment tools are about trade-offs. Do you prefer to be in this situation? Do you prefer to be in that situation with regards to, let's say, introversion, extroversion? And we took that baseline thought of how you assess these unquantifiable factors and made them quantifiable by giving it this sort of tool to be able to guess, okay, do you tilt more on this side of the equation, or do you tilt more on that side of the equation, which is a psychological underpinning. But the only difference is we just used retirement income planning statements to really get at the factors that help answer that it depends.
Nice. Okay, so that takes us then, when we look at it in simplest terms, for those of you that are out there, in simplest terms, RISA really it's a personality test to really get that feel for how prospects feel about their finances. And Erik, let's pull you in at this point. And when you think about RISA, so you're using it. Could you talk a little bit about introducing RISA and then the accuracy and what you're seeing?
Yeah, the rationale for it really in the discovery process is to understand their root beliefs about finance and about the implementation methodology. I really like that part too. I think a couple of things it does is it shows the client how they think about things, which they may not really be too self-aware, but then it gives us information that we're usually trying for an hour-long discovery meeting to try to pull out of a client. We do the RISA prior to meeting one. So before we even have meeting one, I now know more about a client's proclivities when it comes to financial planning and implementation than I would after a full 1 hour discovery meeting. And the accuracy, it sounds a little funny to say, I tell them it's 100% accurate. I've never had one not be accurate. The reality is it's because they're the ones answering the questions. So they come back 100% accurate all the time. But it allows for better discussion, and it allows for better planning because now you can customize the plan to meet the implementation desires of the client, which I think increases our conversion rate.
Now, when you're using it currently, can you where are you using it specifically? Are you using it are you using it with existing clients? Are you using it with prospects? I know that you do. I guess a lot of people don't know this, but you also do seminars, and you're using it with attendees.
Yeah, let's use seminars and referrals as the two primary examples. We give people the opportunity to take the RISA, and we provide them a link and a follow-up email after the seminar, and we request that they take the RISA assessment prior to meeting one. So there's a couple things about that. Number one, we actually know that they're somewhat vested in the process when they answer the questions, and we do get notifications in our email when a client has begun the assessment or completes the assessment. And we review it in meeting one. There's a special spot in meeting one where I review it, but we get that information prior to our first face-to-face meeting. And for a referral that comes in, it's I usually have a preliminary phone call with a referral first, and then we send them the RISA along with a checklist of documents, so that we can then begin true discovery meeting, and then go right to full plan.
Nice. All right. At this moment, I want to ask the audience a question. Are you using, I'm going to just throw this poll question out there, but are you currently using some kind of assessment software? I think everyone's using some kind of risk analysis. So let's discount that for just a second. But what kind, are you getting that personality factored in? Are you getting a look at the motivation of clients, of your prospects? Wow, it looks so far. So far, we've got 100% over on the are you using some kind of software? Wait, does that surprise you? Oh, wait, scratch that. Now you can't call the poll too early. It looks like we're sitting now about 50-50. It keeps changing. So it's a little more towards the no category. Does that surprise you, Wade, when in your experience of talking to advisors as far as what they're using software-wise? It looks like we're going to dance right about 50-50.
I wouldn't say I'm surprised. Yeah, I mean, of course, you said discount the risk tolerance questionnaires, which probably most people do use. But beyond that, I don't think there really has been a lot of opportunities. And so advisors who may have found something along these lines may be using personality test-based assessment tools. And I guess I'm not surprised that some portion of people do that, but for a lot of advisors, it hasn't really been on their radar.
Let's talk. The fellas here have seen the slides, but I'm going to dance around through them because I think we segue to a natural spot, which is what do you see that really gets different using the RISA versus, say, your traditional risk analysis? Alex, let's have you tell me a little bit about that. And then Erik, I want to hear from you as far as your perspective on what I just said. Like, how does RISA really deviate or give a different outcome than just your traditional risk analysis?
Sure. I'll just kick it off here. It's not a risk assessment tool. I think risk tolerance questionnaires are fine from the standpoint of the accumulation stage, because there's not much going on other than there's an investment focus, right? But as you retire, as you transition into retirement, there's just new risks. And a risk tolerance questionnaire it's not equipped to really measure the risk that these clients want to offload off their own balance sheet, frankly. And the RISA is able to pick up on that in a way that risk tolerance questionnaires just don't. If I had to give an analogy, imagine if you're a doctor and I'm checking your pulse and I'm doing it with a thermometer, right? It's just not going to work. Yeah. And so from that vantage point, I think the RISA really stands tall in terms of being able to really ask the fundamental question, how do you want to source retirement income? But it's asking them by picking up personality traits, right? And to be able to then use that and point to solutions as a starting point is really unique. Now, the last point I would say is Erik is right. I think the good advisors do this implicitly, albeit it may take an hour, as Erik said, after the meeting or whatnot. This really gets to the meat of the sandwich immediately. And then it allows the advisor to really peel that onion, but in a manner that's more sensitive to where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think, I've got a hunch, and Erik, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about your experience here. But one of the things, Alex, that I think you really hit on is that most advisors are doing this, like you said, intuitively. They're putting it out there. But I bet, like you just said, I bet that they're getting there, but every time it's probably a little bit different. Mm-hmm. They're not as intentional with it. And Erik, that's one thing I know about you is you are a man with a plan for just about everything and efficiency. Your experience using this, and then, but specifically that differentiation between your traditional risk analysis and RISA, and what do you get out of it?
Right. I think the traditional risk tolerance questionnaires, which we still do, puts the client or prospective client into the mindset of their brokerage account. They're literally just thinking about volatility and the movement of this notional picture they have in their head of their investments and what's going to keep them up at night. Important to know for sure. But when you start to create these quadrants, probability-based, safety, commitment versus optionality, we're not just talking about how do you feel from a risk perspective, for example, on volatility in an account, but how do you feel about your ability to access your money? So it really talks about distribution methodology and combines that with this desire for probability or lack thereof, which starts to go into how do you produce income streams? How should we invest the money? How much should we completely safeguard from market risk? It gives us a lot more information that hits on all the primary deliverables that we're trying to achieve, the outcomes we're trying to achieve with clients.
Let's talk a little bit about, you know what, I want to come back to this. So how do we get there? How do we get the client's information? What does that look like? Let's take a look at what the client sees, and then we're going to come back to the reports and the output. So what you're seeing is literally what the client sees. And Wei, can you talk a little bit about, I've gotten questions before about how long is the questionnaire? What ability do you have to customize it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the advisor, when they would like someone to take the questionnaire, they can, the assessment, they send a link, or even if it's a seminar, webinar type format, you could have a QR code that they can then take a picture of that, take it on their phone. So there's a couple basic demographic questions. And then you've got some optionality and flexibility around, there's 4 potential components to the questionnaire that you can include. If you just want the basic RISA score, what's their retirement income style, that's about 12 questions, and they can do the whole assessment in about 5 minutes or so. And you get the basic scoring around their viewpoints. Are they safety first versus probability based? And are they commitment oriented versus optionality oriented? And that provides the starting point around what sort of retirement income strategy will resonate best for that particular individual. You can build questionnaires and customize. So there's a few other sets of questions you might include. There are secondary factors that generally we don't think are important to telling the story. But if you have an engineering client, you might also ask the secondary factors that will add another 5 to 10 minutes to do those. So usually we leave those out. But then there's also the retirement concern questions and this is where really RISA is very different from risk tolerance, because risk tolerance questionnaires are simply about that short-term market volatility. And what we found is risk tolerance questionnaires do not relate to the concerns people have post-retirement. The concern about, will I run out of money? The concern about, will I have liquid resources to pay for unexpected long-term care expenses and so forth? And so the RISA factors do align much better, but the retirement concerns can help that initial discovery meeting conversation with identifying what the individual is most concerned about. And that will align. Individuals who are more concerned about outliving their money are probably going to express characteristics more along the lines of safety first and commitment. And then the other question set that you may or may not include, but you can include with prospects especially, is the financial implementation, which is about how does this individual want to implement their financial plan? And if they score as a delegator or a collaborator, then you can be assured as the advisor, they're much more likely to be looking for an ongoing advisory relationship. And if they're a delegator, they just want to know the answers. They don't want to get into the weeds. But if they're a collaborator, you can customize the meeting to get a little bit more into the weeds. They really want to understand and be involved with the planning process. And then if the individual scores as a validator, they're not necessarily looking for an ongoing advisory relationship. So maybe either a one-time planning opportunity, or maybe even a financial product is all at the end of the day they're looking for. But you know in advance what that relationship might look like. And if they score as the self-directed, do-it-yourself type consumer, that's where, is using this as a prospecting tool in seminars and so forth, you can more quickly get to the close loss, because this individual, they might want a financial product, but they're not going to want an ongoing advisory relationship. And so you have that sense, what's their retirement income style? How do they want to implement their financial plan? And you have that information for that discovery meeting with prospects.
Nice. You know what? This is a perfect spot. I want to remind everybody to chat the Q&A function. Chat, everyone sees it. Q&A only I do, which is perfect because there is a question in here for Erik, and I was going to swing your way, Erik. The question is, how do you use it? Where are you using? Let me. Okay, so the question is, how are you sending out the questionnaire, and what's completion look like? And then I've got a follow-up question on something Wade had just said for you. But when are you sending it out?
Address that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I send it out, my actually Heidi. So she's the one who communicates with the prospect between seminar and meeting one. She sends it out in the follow-up email that the clients get who requested meetings with us, and they simply get a link, and then that link takes them to the login page for RISA where they create their profile and then answer the questions.
Wait, I'm going to step you back. How do you introduce it at the seminar? How do you set the table for it?
At the end of the seminar, I basically I talk about how RISA can help them understand their own, financial planning style, learn something about themselves. And for those clients that schedule meetings, they get access to a complimentary RISA assessment. And just keep in mind that if somebody goes online and looks for the RISA assessment to do it on their own, there's a fee of, I think it's like $39 or something like that. So we get to show that there's value, and they get that complimentary. And we tell them that they'll get the link to the assessment between the seminar and meeting one, and the expectation is they'll take it there and they'll get a copy of it in meeting one. When I set the parameters for the RISA assessment, I do not allow the RISA to send them their results as soon as they're finished. They have to come into the meeting where I review the results, and I give them a hand-printed copy or a printed copy of the results.
Okay, so you're giving them the copy. So let's follow up. Now we can swing over to following up on the results and the optionality, those that are delegators, those that are do-it-yourselfers. Talk about what you see and how this is a tool. Because I've seen some people say that RISA is great for just selling annuities or guaranteed income, and I love the way that you're using it, because that's not the full story. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, by no means. I mean, it's accurate when it comes to the do-it-yourselfer folks. That's what I have found, which means you want to consider your approach. And whenever we're talking about a meeting flow and engagement process where you're going to be seeing a multitude of prospects due to maybe at seminars or other prospecting methods you have for creating your pipeline, you need to minimize effort that is not going to result in revenue. So if you know that somebody is a do-it-yourselfer, when you go into meeting one, if that is confirmed by everything you're hearing, and most advisors are pretty good at picking that out, you need to decide if you're going to make a quick turn to determine, do they actually need something that I can help them with, that I can provide, knowing they're probably not going to become a long-term client. And that's what Wade had said. Maybe they need a financial product, and then the relationship will kind of be over after that. Instead of going through the full 3-meeting process potentially, or 2-meeting process, depending on how you cut it short, it just lets you moderate your effort. And those clients that are having lower self-efficacy and find that an advisor is extremely helpful, well, we really do find that they want to work with an advisor. So you're going to approach that meeting process a little bit differently, providing the value in meeting 2, which is, part of our process at the Rainmaker Project, and then leading into a fee-based plan in meeting 3.
Okay, nice. So let's talk a little bit. So when you look at the screen, let's just walk through this screen,
Sure.
The next screen. Tell us what you see, and then we're going to get Alex's perspective here in just a second.
Which are you wanting me just to comment on? I'm seeing mapping the RISA matrix. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, when I see opportunity versus commitment, towards commitment to me means they're looking for guaranteed income streams. Now, one thing to keep in mind is some people will answer that question in the affirmative, so they're going to bias towards commitment. But knowing that Social Security is kind of a commitment or a guaranteed income stream, and so are pensions, many people who have meaningful pensions in addition to Social Security will answer that with a high commitment level. But it doesn't necessarily mean they need a new one. So you do want to keep that in mind. You have to navigate that appropriately. Now, for those clients that have, goods, liquid assets, modest Social Security, and no pensions, that's where you may lead more into a commitment style fixed annuity with an income rider, for example. And then safety first versus probability first. Probability first typically is a bias towards brokerage accounts. And it also, if they're a probability and an opportunity based person, then, or optionality rather, then they're looking at having these different types of accounts, bucket strategies. I want to draw from my Roth for some things, from my IRA for another. They want the brokerage account investment returns and the risk associated with that to be, a major component of their decision making, but they don't like their money locked up. So I think that how this maps out to their actual scenario and then filling the gaps with the recommendations is what this matrix allows us to do.
Nice. Alex, as you designed, you and Wade put this together, give us a little bit of color on any trends, anything you see, or anything that advisors should be aware of as they look at this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting to me, because I think when you talk about the RISA, folks like to put things in buckets. And we said it earlier, risk tolerance questionnaire. And again, it's not that. What's interesting about this is that it really begins to dovetail nicely into all the services that you can be providing, simply put, because if you treat it like, if you think it's a risk tolerance questionnaire, or that's all you go by, then, as Erik was saying, it kind of starts setting up the mindset of the brokerage account. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that, other than that may not be how that person wants to source retirement income. And so with the RISA, what's interesting is that it actually helps expand the purview of what the consumer thinks the advisor is doing. It's not just, we're gonna put you into a model portfolio and things like that. You're really able to see that there's many ways to get it right, and then the RISA helps identify those ways. And I think that's very important, especially for folks that do have annuities within their services, because it's something that, there's always that transition. How do I introduce this? How do I introduce this? With the RISA, what's happening is the client is actually at face value, as Erik said, at face value, they're answering questions that make it obvious how they want to source retirement income. And so in effect, they're permissioning you to bring up solutions that fit their profile, which in a sense is, as you have it here, contractual protection. And it just makes that transition into providing services that make sense for them a lot easier, without getting into the whole, are you pitching me this, or is this something that I want? Mm-hmm. I think that's something that Wade and I didn't see coming, because we've heard a lot of times advisors tell us point blank, it's permissioning me the ability to now curate an annuity solution based on what they're telling me. I think that's something that was missing before, that Wade and I didn't realize, that there was this friction. When do I introduce this? When do I introduce this? Or how do I introduce this without, getting into it? And I think this provides a nice seamless transition into that. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when you said that. Another thing is that there is a high level of predictability. I would love it to be 100%, but this is psychology and economics, and so it's a soft science, right? Yep. But there is a high level of statistical significant predictability in terms of where they fall in the quadrant and what they end up doing and what they end up having. As you see here, 67% of the folks want contractual income. You would think, if you listen to the newspapers, CNBC or whatnot, that really 90% want some sort of market solution and everything else is being sold to them. And that's not the case at all. You'd be surprised how many folks want contractual protection. In fact, we're rolling up studies and we're seeing this over and over again. But going back to the predictability, I think it's in slide 10, Dennis.
Mhm.
You can hop over there for 1 second. Wade, you may want to discuss the predictability around this. And so what you're seeing here is this is where, you see all the quadrants, top right, total return. If you're optionality and probability based, you kind of want the sustainable withdrawal from a portfolio, because you want the probability base, which is I want this market exposure. I'm betting on the probability that the markets will go up over the long term. Hence, I can take a sustainable distribution. The optionality component is I realize it's variable, the market, and so I have to be willing to jab accordingly, right? On the far left, on the bottom left, you have the safety first, which is I want contractual income. I want to offset my liabilities to somebody else's balance sheet through a contract, annuity, Social Security, as you said, what have you. Even government bonds are effectively, a contract, if you will. And then commitment orientation is I want to commit to this long-term solution if it solves my income need, right? And so on that bottom left, you're seeing lifetime protections, annuities. Wade, can you speak a little bit about since I've spoken for a little bit now, about the predictability around the RISA?
Yeah. So what you're specifically seeing here is we asked individuals in one of our early studies, do you own or do you plan to use an annuity for lifetime income? And then we chart the percentage of people who said yes based on their retirement styles. And everything's on a spectrum. We have the 4 retirement style quadrants, but you could be more to the extreme probability based. You could be mildly probability based, mildly safety first, extreme safety first. And what we found is as you move in that lower left-hand direction, there's more and more interest in annuities. And so it's predictive in regard to if I'm speaking with a prospect and they score in that lower left-hand quadrant, they're going to be much more open to that conversation around an annuity. If they score in the upper right-hand quadrant, they do have even maybe they get the bias through the consumer media about investments, but even cutting through that, they fundamentally have characteristics where they're more investments oriented and they have a degree of flexibility that allows more for investments to work. They fundamentally don't have an interest in annuities. And so if you're an advisor who is focused on the annuity side, you then get that predictive power that I'm going to have much better opportunities speaking with people as I shift into that lower left-hand direction of the RISA matrix. And for individuals who score like in the extreme upper right-hand corner, they're looking for a purely investment-based solution. And I could spend a lot of energy trying to convince them to use an annuity, but at the end of the day, they're never going to accept or buy or purchase an annuity. You really want to put your efforts into individuals in the lower left-hand direction.
We have to ask Erik. So Erik, what's your experience on that? Have you had folks that are like everything says you just told me you want everything about an annuity, and Matt, the RISA came out that way, but you're telling me you don't?
No, I don't really have any experiences like that. It's pretty accurate. When they are looking at probability based and optionality oriented, they are pretty much biased towards brokerage accounts, and it's based. How did they get there is an interesting question. Is it because they did such a great job, or is it because they go by, I hear this 1,000 times. I'm sure other advisors too. Like, well, my current advisor just did a great job, over the last 10 years, especially in 2019, they would say that, which is the same as saying, hey, when the market went up, I made money. I think that when they run into trouble, their opinions can change. So 2022, I think, changed the opinion of a lot of people. But for the most part, optionality, probability-based people, whatever the genesis of their perspective is, are brokerage oriented and safety first, commitment oriented, are annuity of one type or another. Commitment oriented can mean both income stream or a commitment to a period of time to allow it to grow in a protected fashion, I think, as well. But it's pretty accurate from what I've seen, and we've done quite a few of these.
Yeah, and Dennis, if I can add to that, I think when you're looking at these things, the question that comes to mind from advisors is how reliable is it? Like, think about a weight scale, right? Unfortunately, when I get up this morning and weigh myself, it'll be the same weight, an hour later, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? It's one of those, like, you want for something to be accurate, it has to be reliable, right? What we talk about predictability here, that's more validity, which you need it out the door, but it's also reliable. And I think another way to look at it from what Erik is saying is that during different times, you'll get similar results. We've seen that in all of our studies where you do test, retest, or you look at different, different age groups, and do the age groups map out the same accordingly, or do they get more risk averse, if you will, as they get older? Risk tolerance questionnaires, there's a lot of transients. Here, you see it pretty steady. You're measuring this sort of trait. And so think of it like introversion, extroversion, right? People are pretty much going to be similar throughout their life. Sure, environment may cause some changes on the edges, but for the most part, you're measuring a trait. And so I think one of the reasons Erik is seeing, it hits is because the questions are really at face value. We're not asking you, are you left-handed? And because you're left-handed, you want this. We're really, kind of explaining solutions that products have and seeing where you land on that. And so that tends to bring in a lot of reliability for you, which is great when you're making an assessment tool. Now, one of the things I would say that this blends very well in terms of where the profession is going is the comment that, the investment stuff, the things that have to do with numbers, that issue has primarily been solved. And for advisors, it's the emotional issues and helping guiding the client during these tumultuous times. That's really where it's at. Well, if you look at behavior finance, a lot of the stuff that's been out there is really just saying, hey, we all have biases. Here's what they are. But guess what? There's nothing you could do about it. So vaya con Dios kind of thing, right? With here, I think what we've done, and we didn't mean to do this at the beginning. It just kind of, you pull a string and before you know it, things develop. I feel we've done a good service in terms of blending behavioral finance in a practical manner, that an advisor can now use this and help with the advice they provide, right? Because not only can we profile individuals, we can profile solution sets. And so someone that is in the income protection quadrant, that pertains to certain annuity solutions that are different from the risk wrap quadrant, that are different from the time segmentation quadrant. I remember, Erik, you were talking about, hey, you're now considering living benefits, which is something you didn't based on RISA scores that you're seeing. So even within the advisory firm, you're able to also expand the purview of potential solutions, which from a revenue standpoint, is good. But more importantly, from a servicing the client standpoint, you're doing a great service because you're taking their best interest into account in terms of providing a solution.
Nice. Okay. Let's, Erik, any comment on everything you've been hearing?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it as the advisor, and when you're sitting across from a prospect that you've only maybe met at a seminar, like you wish you knew, do they want to move ahead with an advisor? Do they think that advisory help is in their best interest? Or the opposite, are they just here trying to get some information because they are do-it-yourselfers and they just want confirmation that what they're doing is right? And it's literally like you're lifting the veil. By getting that RISA before you have that meeting, you're lifting it up and you see all those answers. And then the one difference, as Alex had mentioned, was I shied away from income riders for quite a while. And what happens is if you have an approach that's systematic, I do and did, where I did not on a systematic basis utilize income riders, I can guarantee there were some people that walked out the door that otherwise would have become clients because my recommendation maybe didn't include a guaranteed income stream. And therefore, they rightfully perceived that maybe it wasn't a good match. And in my mind, maybe I perceived, it wasn't a good match. They don't like our approach and so forth. But now that the veil is lifted and we can understand that that's what they desire, it's where they're at, and then you build that into the plan. So your approach is modified, rightfully so, by a deeper knowledge that they don't even know, you can see through everything now. That's where I earlier in the presentation said it can increase your conversion rate. Now, people that may be walking out the door simply because you're planning options are not directly correlated to their desire and implementation method. Now you have more people where the method of implementation is aligned more directly. I think is going to increase conversion. And we're seeing that. I've been using income riders where they make sense. And I just think that knowledge is so critical, like lifting up the hood of the car and you're like, there it all is. That's how it works for this person, really is extremely meaningful.
I like that. RISA does give that opportunity from exactly what you just said, is the ability to introduce also new products, new ideas into a practice. Alex, actually, let's talk a little bit real quick. We're opening it up for questions now. So again, chat box, bottom right corner of your screen. If you click on it, Robin's Egg Blue, it'll open it, it'll expand it. If you type something into chat, everyone sees it. If you type something into the Q&A, only I see it. I will be your proxy. So let's talk a little bit about RISA as a lead magnet. And Wade, do you want to hit on that just a little bit?
Yeah, so actually this has really been an initiative from Alex's side in terms of seeing the RISA. And that was really the original reason we developed the RISA too, was this idea of a lead magnet, having something out there, a website based around it, using it in webinars, being able to develop a tool that even with radio shows or podcasts, people can then have that next step for that engagement where they've heard you speak, they click, they take their RISA, then you're able to schedule that meeting and have that discovery conversation with them. So we're finding that in practice, it's really that lead magnet idea that's really paving the path towards getting that engagement from individuals. Alex, if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, no. I think this dovetails, in my view, nicely with everything that CreativeOne does on their marketing end, in terms of the reinforcements. But I have to say, we've released this about 2 years ago. And one of the biggest surprises we've gotten from advisors, the number one question is, how do I use this, right? And from a marketing standpoint, they see this as a significant lead magnet. We created this. Look, Wade and I are sort of science nerds, right? And so we were answering a research question. What we didn't realize is we were also answering a sales question, which is how do I get folks to engage with me? And over the last few months, it's become apparent that the folks that are using the RISA exceptionally well are those that are using it as that tip of the spear marketing tool. Erik said, it's great before the meeting because it sets you up nicely. And so if you can, with the help of CreativeOne and everything within their resources that are available for advisors, I think it would be incredibly wise to use this and create a lead magnet strategy around that, where, developing ads, developing, webinars that are strictly for this, where at the end, the call to action or the tripwire that you have on your ads are effectively take the RISA. And I think that's something I would take advantage of, simply because right now that's not something that's readily available for consumers. There is nothing there. And you've been like scrolling and the like, and there's always these quizzes that you want to take, and people really like to find out about themselves. And so, like, we were stunned. I mean, we have one advisor that's clearing 80 of these a week, simply because, we just had a meeting this morning because he's tuned in. He's tuned in about using this as a lead magnet. And so if you think about this, before you even meet a client, and this piggybacks on what Erik was saying, their starting point from a retirement income standpoint that's going to resonate with them. But I don't want to discount the implementation matrix, where not only do you know how they want to implement, not only do you know how they want to like source retirement income, at least as a starting point, you also know their persona. You know that this person's a collaborator. This person's going to need this cadence of information in a nurturing sequence. This person is a validator. They're going to need this nurturing sequence. This person's a do-it-yourselfer. This person may not be worth my time because, as Erik also alluded to, sometimes close loss is the best thing you could do for your funnel. So you concentrate and marshal your resources on the folks that really want to, engage with you. And so if you really don't think of the RISA so much as, oh, when I have a prospect, I'm going to send them the RISA, think of it as this can actually bring in prospects in a manner that's pretty cool. Because if you are giving them the RISA, it's not a quizzical. It's not, oh, something silly. It's something that they're going to appreciate the thought behind it, and you're going to get a win because it's a nice first impression to be making, and that consumer is going to be thinking, yes, I can see how I get the joke. This person is actually starting with my best interest in mind. Let me see how this advisor continues to curate what I've provided in a manner that adds value. And so I think thinking of this as this tip of the spear marketing lead generation tool is very interesting, and that's what we're hearing from the over 600 firms that we have of how they really want to use this and understand it. And I think that dovetails immensely well with the services that CreativeOne has to help them run through the tape on that.
I like that. I like that a lot. Erik, that just popped something into my mind here, and that is for Erik, what other information do you pull out of the RISA? I can see the functionality. I can see how this gives us that insight into where their heads are at, but there's got to be more information that you're able to pull. What do you get out of that?
Yeah, this is pretty basic info. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I just got some warning. It looked like maybe it wasn't, but the amount of assets the client has. So when they answer the question, assuming they're being truthful, they actually put in their assets. And when you open up those little gift boxes, I call the RISA assessment, the very first thing you see is their assets. So it's like, hey, we have 5 million in assets. So that piques your interest as an advisor right away. And then you immediately go to the back page and you look at their efficacy versus advisor helpfulness, or the combination of those. And when you see, a bias towards low efficacy and a bias towards high advisor helpfulness, you're like, wow, this is sounding pretty good. Then you start digging into, what type of planning might make sense for them. But it's pretty interesting to do that. And just to bounce off of something Alex just said, I've got to steal some of that language. Boy, that sounds really good. The curating, I love it. But to do a minor translation of that into conversion processes, you should, over time, and I'm in the middle of this, I don't have it completely done, create a process for each type of client. So when you have somebody that maybe is a validator or even a do-it-yourselfer, you may be able to, in a much shorter fashion, determine if there's something that you can provide them, whether maybe it's just an annuity once and done and you're gone, but at least and you may actually generate some realistic revenue from that. But how do you do that? How do you do that well is a really interesting question. How is your process honed in to getting to that point where that can be the answer, versus somebody that needs a more of a nurturing curating process that Alex mentioned, where we're walking through the 3 meetings steps to get to the full plan. So anyway, but we love opening up the RISAs every time we get one. It's really interesting. We're always excited.
Nice. I've got a couple questions that have popped in. One right off the top here, probably one of the most important one. We got a question. What are the costs? And the costs, we've got it at Creative. We've got it. It's $1,000 for a year, 12 months. And then you can do that credit card or BAC. So $1,000 a year. Another question that popped in here in the Q&A. And Wade, I'm going to send this one to you. And then Erik, I'm curious to your thoughts from the field. But spouses. There's a question here. Do you have spouses each do their own RISA? And how do you do that? Like, if they don't jive?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question. So we do really recommend that each individual spouse or partner in the relationship takes the RISA on their own. And since you'll have unlimited RISA uses, no issues with doing that. But by having each individual take it, it really provides the opportunity to get their preferences individually, so that you don't have to worry that one person was dominating the answering of the questions and so forth. And this can open a lot of opportunities for a couple to really engage in a dialogue. Perhaps one of the individuals has more of that investment-oriented approach. The other spouse is more income protection-oriented. And we've talked to individuals where that was a surprise. The investment person was the one managing the household finances, and they never realized their spouse didn't really think about things in the same manner. And so then getting into the compromises, that can really lay the foundation to just be more effective with your investments, because when you treat each individual as part of the conversation and you build that protection to make sure that those basics are covered, that increases risk capacity for the household so that they don't have to be as worried about market volatility. The investments-oriented person can have more flexibility with what they do on the investment side because they took a portion of the assets and built that protection stream into place. So this has created a lot of dialogue and opportunity for couples to really work together to build the retirement plan. And with all the discussion as well about when the first spouse passes away, the advisor loses that relationship because the surviving spouse, which in many cases is the woman, she never felt heard. Well, now she has the opportunity to be heard and to have that plan crafted so that there is that compromise. Both individuals have a plan that they're comfortable with, and that may include income protection, and that creates that stickier relationship for both of the spouses, so that you've got both individuals really satisfied with the planning process.
Nice. Now, before I want to swing over, Erik, I want you to comment on that because I want to hear what's coming in from the field. Question that popped up. It said it was a follow-up to the cost. It is $1,000 for the year for 12 months. You can use BAC. You can use credit card. The question is, $1,000 a year, unlimited usage? Yes. Go out and use as many RISAs as possible. Do them for everybody. Erik Bowman, spouses, do you use it? Do you have them each do it separately, or what's your experience?
We have not. We've typically sent it out to the person that provides their contact information and who seems to be the one driving the process. But listening to them talk and understanding and having experience that there is some differences between the people. I've had everything from I've like once or twice I've had both take it because they just both did it. Other times I've had one person take it and then we compare it and let the other person comment on it in the meeting. And then there have been a few people where they both took it together. So it's kind of a mixed set of answers. But I believe that it is obvious that having both of the prospective clients, the spouses, take the assessment is the most appropriate. And I'm actually going to start driving that just based on really thinking about it as I'm listening to how important it obviously is. And so that's what we're going to be doing going forward, is trying to get both of them to take it. But you get some people where one spouse is truly driving the process, the other is simply not that involved. And you're not going to necessarily have both of them take it all the time. But I think as a goal, it's appropriate.
Nice. Here's one. So I've got, this is something I was just thinking about. So when is it appropriate? And Alex, I'm going to throw this to you. When is it appropriate for a client as opposed to a prospect? And then of course, Erik, I'm going to swing that back to you.
Sure. There's a couple of notes there. Prospect, obviously before the discovery meeting, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is, as an advisor, you have a normal distribution of clients. You can be niched out, but for the most part, you have younger clients, older clients, retired clients, pre-retired clients. I believe it's essential as clients transition into retirement. If you have a client base in which they're, let's say, into their 50s, even though they're not ready to retire, but let's say they're within 10 years of retirement or within striking distance of that, I think it's important to give them the RISA. I don't do it with the implementation piece because they're already clients and I don't have the courage to find out if they're delegators since they're already here. But the reality is it's good that they know that something is in place. I mean, literally yesterday, we have McLean Asset Management, which is an RIA. And yesterday, actually Saturday, I was in Miami and I was speaking to a prospect, and it was a Morgan Stanley client, and he wants to move simply because he is getting ready. He still is probably 5-10 years away from retirement, but he's recognizing that there is nothing in place to transition into retirement income. The accumulation is going away and it's becoming decumulation. So when clients start thinking about that, I think it's quite important to give them the RISA because it shows that you're up to date with the investment literature, retirement income literature, and that you have a plan in place to transition into retirement income planning. Because again, pre-retiree, it's kind of an accumulation stage, and it fits very similar to a total return approach because you're really just going to turn on the faucet. But again, 67% of your clients most likely are not going to want something like that into retirement. And so if you're able to introduce the RISA to them, it really puts you in a different light. It puts you in the light of this sort of guide, and you're guiding them through retirement. In the hero's journey, the client is a hero, right? But you're being that effective guide because you're finding out as life changes, how do we change accordingly? And so I think it's great for that. I think it's great for folks that are at that moment of truth. And I think it's great for even clients that are maybe 5 years into retirement. Now, sometimes you may be hesitant to think, I don't want to find out as an advisor. But the reality is, I don't think you can advise scared. And science moves forward. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this is a new thing. I want to implement it because I want to make sure that you always have the best of the best available to you. I think client respect you for that. And based on how we've done it and based on the feedback we've heard from current advisors, I think for existing clients, that's the way to go as well.
All right. That was passionate. So Erik Bowman, what do you think?
We haven't done it with existing clients yet. I would probably modify the questions, so I might not want to include, there's the self-efficacy component, advisor usefulness component, only because they're already clients. I mean, there's no need to, I think, push any buttons for whatever reason. But understanding optionality versus commitment, safety first versus probability, those are good to know, and I can see where that would be useful for sure.
Nice. Okay, we are going to let's land this plane here. And while we do that, if you've got any last questions, fellas, you think of any last final summation thoughts, I just want to reiterate a couple things. So one, we recorded this. We'll push the recording out if you want to go back, fact check Alex in particular. Just kidding, Alex. But you can take a look and take a listen and go back to what we were talking about. Two, if you do have questions, if you do want to go deeper and look at RISA and look at adding it to your practice, reach out to your sales team here at CreativeOne. If you're not sure who they are, I can let you know. I can get that squared away. I'll have them reach out to you. But it's $1,000 a year. You can use BAC, Business Accelerator credits, if you're doing business with us. Think like your shopping card. Or you can do credit card that gets you unlimited usage for the year. Now, and look at that, a question just popped up. Let's see what we got over here. We got a thank you. You are welcome. So final thoughts, short final thoughts. Wade, you are first, sir.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And thank you, Erik, for sharing your experiences, and looking forward to working with more folks through CreativeOne. Thank you.
Love it. Alex, you know what? Let's just throw our mugs up there. I'm turning your guys' cameras on. Boom. Well, I can. Alex, you better be sitting there. There you are. Let's go over here. I'll turn my own on. There's everybody. All right. So, Alex, final thoughts?
No, other than we're excited to be doing this with CreativeOne. I literally encourage you folks to try it out, simply because we've seen it firsthand, and we hear it every day. We know we're onto something simply because of the feedback we've gotten from advisors. We're developing this sort of family, if you will, of folks that are all about it. So we're very excited about it, and we welcome you to join us.
Very nice. Mr. Bowman, we'll leave it to you. You are muted. That's a perfect thought, though.
Better discoveries equals better planning equals more clients.
I think that is the perfect way to wrap up right there. On behalf of Wade, on behalf of Alex, on behalf of Erik, I would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to learn more about RISA. Happy to answer any questions. Reach out. I'll have the teams, the guys and gals reach out to you, see if you have any follow-up questions. But with that being said, let's go have a fantastic rest of the day. Be safe, and let's go close some business. We'll see you all later.
Thank
you.